I'm a little worried about what I saw yesterday, because I really am afraid that, I mean, there's a place for stunts and awareness building, but frankly, I think there's a risk that that kind of thing can marginalize people who are trying to make environmental action, and especially local environmental action, something tangible and accessible for people. So if they see people draping banners off the Parliament buildings, they might think, okay, do I want to be part of something like that? And I think also too, we run the risk of allowing the leaders like Stephen Harper to marginalize environmental groups by associating them with extreme action like that, when what we really need is to empower people to make smarter choices at the local level that lead to consensus and pressure on the politicians through traditional means.
So I don't think it really marginalizes people at all. I mean, I think it actually inspires people to take actions of their own. And we are seeing this growing movement across the country where ordinary people are, acting in whatever way they feel is appropriate. They're calling their MP, they're doing sit-ins, they're going to demonstrations, they're talking to their friends, they're making different consumer choices. People are really mobilizing. And what we hear when we do actions like that is, we're with you. We get so many emails and calls from people saying, you're doing what I can't do. I wish I support you. I wish I could be there. And I think that it's sometimes those big things which provide an opportunity for that discussion, an opportunity for people to make their voices heard as part of that dialogue.
I would just be very interested to know if people, what spectrum of people associate themselves with that kind of action and feel mobilized by it. I'm sure there's a great groundswell of support among traditional environmental organizations and people that might call themselves environmentalists to support that kind of action. I'm not saying that it doesn't have a place, but I don't think the dramatic stunts like that are going to be a catalyst for broad public engagement in environmental action. We have to provide simple, accessible first steps that people can take to make them feel that they can make a difference. The biggest problem that I think we have is not climate change. It's the perception that climate change and global warming are too big for people to do anything about, and they're starting to feel resigned. I can't climb on the top of the Peace Tower, but what can I do to get started to take action on this locally without doing something like that?
And let's come back to that in a moment, but Stephen, do you think that Stuart's comments are fair, that a protest, a demonstration like yesterday's might fire up the people who are already committed on this issue, but does it engage the people who aren't?
Well, I think I would say that as the environmental community, we have not succeeded in mobilizing the Canadian public to really buy into, to really understand the threat that climate change poses and really start to do something about it. We haven't succeeded. I mean, I've been working on this issue for over 20 years. 20 years ago, a bunch of us from national environmental groups met with Brian Mulroney, and the key issue we talked about was climate change and the need for a carbon tax. Now, we didn't get it, partly because the GST was coming in, but this is not a new issue. It's been around a long time. We haven't succeeded yet. And I do worry, as Stuart does, that maybe some Canadians are shutting down. It's too big, I can't cope with it.
Exactly.
Because the climate change is really about changing human behavior, and we haven't figured that one out yet, and I don't know the answers. Well, I think you've got some of the answers to it, maybe, but I'm not totally convinced that just doing one little thing at a time is going to solve it.
But in other parts of the world, people have begun to figure this out.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you look at the coverage of Copenhagen and you look at all the advertising that's been done by various green companies in Copenhagen, clearly much of the rest of the world is way ahead of us on this. So in that sense, there are many things that Canadians can do, and in some ways it's easier for us now because so many other countries have taken the lead. We've got a lot of catching up to do, but insofar as feeling it's too big and we can't do things, I think one of the things that Copenhagen is making clear is that lots of other people are way ahead of us, and therefore there are lots of things that Canada can do and Canadians can do both in Ottawa and in other parts of the country. So I think one of the messages we need to take away from the discussion of Copenhagen is, well, what are other people doing? And not just focus on the finer points of the international negotiations, because clearly climate change is not going to be solved just by whatever treaty may or may not come out of Copenhagen. It's about changing a lot of other things too. And there are a whole lot of things that if you look carefully at what's going on in Copenhagen, you begin to realize there's all sorts of NGOs, all sorts of green businesses that are way ahead of what the Canadian economy is doing. And those are the kinds of things that people in their own lives need to look at. What kind of business can I run? What kind of new technology can I put in my house that will reduce my energy consumption? Those kinds of issues there's lots of things that Canadians can do. And that's one of the crucial things that we need to keep in mind with all this discussion about Copenhagen.
See, I'd really like to echo that again. And this is why a conference like this is so exciting. Not so much for the treaty that might come out of it, but the fact that there's this cross-fertilization and sharing of information and stuff. That's what it should be like. That's what, all these new tools, social media and stuff that we have that are allowing people to communicate in new ways should be laying the foundation for a lot of collaboration on these things. And I think that's happening too. But I want to touch on what Stephen said, and this is a fundamental difference between the traditional environmental organization approach, which has its role in the 20 years of working to raise awareness and to mobilize a certain segment of the population that responds to a traditional approach, like a call to action, and an organization like ours that is mobilizing the people that you've reached over the past 20 years, but is only like really 30% maybe of the population who's acted on that. How do we get to the other ones? A misunderstanding of the kind of role that we play as an organization that works with community groups of all types is that we're just asking people to do simple things and that those things don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. We harness the power of person-to-person communication to get people to change light bulbs, check their tire pressure, things like that, and have often been criticized by saying, oh, you're diminishing the issue. But the fact is, people aren't going to start with solar panels. They're not going to start with a protest on Parliament Hill. They're not going to start by calling their MP. We've discovered that people don't believe that they can make a difference, period. And when they do this, if we can get them to change an old bulb to a new one, what's changed is that person. They feel like they can make a difference, and they're much more likely to continue on that path to other choices, to being active in their community, to calling the MP, and maybe applauding some of the action that you've done.
Some of the things that people can do, and your organization, One Change, which started with the Porch Light program that I think a lot of people are familiar with right here in Ottawa, as you say. Stuart, I wanted to come back to One Change, your organization, because I think for a lot of people, looking at this on a practical level is very helpful. And your organization started with a program here in Ottawa where you encourage people to simply switch one light bulb from the conventional kind to a more environmentally friendly one.
I can't tell you the number of times I've told this story. I'm not an environmentalist, never considered myself one. Admired those people and those organizations, but was never part of that. And I think I'm pretty typical of people in Ottawa that way. But when I found the statistic on the Energy Star website that if you change one old light bulb to a compact fluorescent in your house, it would be like taking 66,000 cars off the road in Canada, I thought, a light bulb went on in my head. And I thought, how hard can it be to get people to do that? It seemed to be something simple, accessible, and a way to start on the continuum of more changes. So we decided to share that message with others, and it's grown exponentially. We're now a charitable organization in Canada and the US. We've registered and trained 12,000 volunteers across the continent, 3 million homes visited. We have 147 employees right now and are a UNEP, United Nations Environment Program partner in North America. Terrific stuff, but you know what? It's not about the light bulb. That is what was remarkable to us, which is why we became, instead of Project Porch Light, One Change, with the slogan, Simple Actions Matter. Because we discovered that people really want to do something simple, positive, pragmatic to get started, but that wasn't going to be the end. It was converting people who are made to feel anxious and aware, because there's a problem, but powerless, into engaged, active people in their communities. And it really, it's not about getting people to change bulbs, it's about getting people started from doing nothing to doing something.
So what are some of the simple actions that people can take? Because I think a lot of people still are at the stage where they need to hear that.
Well, this is the problem. We hear climate change and those big issues, and you feel powerless because global warming has the word global in it, right? There are so many things people can do to save energy, save money, and cut their greenhouse gas. Changing light bulbs is probably the easiest one. Checking your tire pressure regularly. We had a pilot project with digital keychain tire gauges this summer with Canadian Tire that we're rolling across Ontario this year. A little window caulk, cut drafts, get an energy audit on your house. It starts with the simple things, and I can tell you honestly that there is no better way to get people fully engaged in their own homes, and then by extension to their community groups, and then hopefully to their cities and across their own province, feeling that they can make a difference, and the difference they can make will grow by starting with the simple little first steps.